Hello friends, and welcome to my channel. Whether it's your first time here or you're a return visitor, I'm so glad you're here. In today's video, I am sharing a little experiment that I did, let's say. I planted a lot of pumpkins. We'll get into the actual numbers and the stats of how many pumpkins I planted and what happened as we get into the video. So without further ado, let's get on with it. The first thing you have to do when planting pumpkins is dig the holes, obviously. So I got right to work and dug 3,531 holes. I covered every inch of Sunlit Plateau with holes for my massive pumpkin field. Basically, if a hole could be dug, I dug it. To be completely honest with you, I didn't really think this project through, like at all. It didn't take long for the game to start lagging, and my game crashed twice just while digging the holes, but I persisted. At the end of the digging, I ended up with 1,092 clay, which sold for 21.8 thousand star coins, 1,103 soil, which I sold for 3,309 star coins, and 1,032 pebbles, which I was able to sell for 10.3 thousand star coins. My grand total in star coins after all of this digging was 35,409 star coins. As I'm sure you can guess, the next step in my experiment was to plant the pumpkins. I wasn't keeping track of how many holes I dug while I was digging them, so I had absolutely no clue how many seeds I needed to buy or how many star coins I was going to need to purchase all of the seeds I needed. As a result, there was a lot of back and forth during this process, and I basically had to sell off everything I owned in order to have enough star coins to purchase the seeds I needed. During this process, I had two main questions constantly running through my mind. One, why doesn't it ever rain when you want it to? And two, what is wrong with me? Even though I was beginning to question my life choices, I kept going, and in the end, I filled all 3,531 holes with pumpkin seeds. I did end up getting lucky while I was planting the seeds, and it did rain for a little bit during this process. So after I was done planting, I didn't have to water all 3,500 plus pumpkin plants. I don't know how many I actually ended up watering, but it was enough. Unfortunately, there wasn't a whole lot that I could do while I was waiting for the pumpkins to grow. By this point, my game was super laggy, and while it only crashed once during the planting process, I didn't want to risk it crashing again. So I ended up just leaving the game open and did other stuff around my house while nature took its course in the game. After the pumpkins were done growing, it was time to start the harvesting process. So I grabbed my gardening buddy and set out to get to work. This is where things started to get kind of interesting. I didn't consider the item limit when I planted all of these pumpkins, but I knew I definitely wanted to fence up my harvesting buddy. When I went to build my fence around him, I wasn't able to because I was already over the item limit in my valley. Fortunately, I accidentally left a piece of fence in the meadow, so I was able to use that to cage up Kristoff. By this point, I was starting to get pretty excited about this little experiment I was doing. I was anticipating this huge, grand pumpkin explosion, and this eagerness is what motivated me to keep going while I was harvesting. I ended up with 70 stacks of pumpkins, with each stack containing 50 pumpkins. I'm sure Goofy wasn't impressed, as after selling all 3,531 pumpkins I harvested, I was richer and Goofy was poorer by almost 2.6 million star coins. Honestly, I really thought it was going to be more than that, but I wasn't done yet. After harvesting all of the pumpkins, I was finally ready to release Kristoff. It still hadn't dawned on me that even after harvesting all of the pumpkins, I still had over 3,000 holes, pushing my game over the item limit, so I was still anticipating this massive explosion of pumpkins. I was so excited to let Kristoff out of his cage, and I checked and double-checked everything to make sure I was ready for the experience. Finally, it was time. I went into furniture mode, deleted the fence, and nothing happened. By now, I had figured out that the item limit wasn't allowing Kristoff to let go of all the pumpkins he was holding, but I was still determined. So I set out to decrease the item limit as much as I could. I went into furniture mode and used the well to cover all of the holes in Sunlit Plateau. Unfortunately, that still wasn't the solution I was hoping for, and after chasing Kristoff down, still no pumpkins were thrown. I still had one more trick up my sleeve, so off I went to Goofy's stall, where I purchased a few lettuce seeds. I planted those and hoped that when I harvested them, not only would Kristoff throw heads of lettuce at me, but that he would also finally let go of all of the pumpkins I knew he was clinging to. Unfortunately, this still didn't give me the pumpkin blast I hoped for, and I was all out of ideas, so reluctantly, I closed my game. I'm sure a lot of you already know what happened next. I had a pretty good idea myself of what was waiting for me when I opened my game again, and I ran straight to Sunlit Plateau to confirm the devastation that I figured was waiting for me. And I was right. All of those pumpkins that Kristoff refused to throw at me were covering the biome. Even though I knew this was going to be the outcome by this point, it was still a little bit disheartening to see the chaos I created. It took me several days to even start the cleanup process, and once I started, it was several more days before it was complete. In the end, I ended up picking up another 3,003 pumpkins and added another nearly 1.9 million star coins to my wallet. Now that my valley is back to normal and the pumpkin planting extravaganza is nothing but a memory, I can laugh at the outcome. But looking back, I should have known from the get-go I wasn't going to get the thousands of pumpkins raining down on me like I had hoped. I may try again in the future to see just how many pumpkins it takes to achieve the max pumpkin explosion, but for now, I'm going to focus on donating all of these star coins to Scrooge. That is, if he ever tries to sell me anything good. Until next time, friends, peace out.